This is the Dover Download Podcast. My name is Christopher Parker, and for the past 25 years, I've had the pleasure of working with, learning from, and talking to a variety of volunteer, staff, and community members. This podcast explores conversations, activities, and a variety of policies and programs which exist here in Dover to improve the community in one way or another. In the past on the podcast, we've talked about how the city has a role to play with business and economic development. Part of that role is working with the Dover Business Industrial Development Authority, which is an advisory board with 13 members on it. Two of those former members are here to talk to us today. Tim Dargan and Scott Johnson are both former chair and vice chair of the Business Industrial Development Authority, and they're going to tell us about their experience. They're going to tell us about their expectations and how they were either met or not, and talk about their time being involved with business and industrial growth here in the city. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Tim, you were on the authority a lot longer than Scott. Or maybe not a lot longer, but longer. So why don't you start us off? Give the listener a little bit of who is Tim Dargan and what your time frame on the board was.
So entire time I was on the board, I was in commercial banking in Dover through various banks. I'm currently with First Seacoast Bank. Been there for 15 years now. But I got involved when I believe Pat Murray stepped off the board. I was replaced. And I'm trying to remember, I think it was Will Bach, wasn't he? Was the mayor.
He was the mayor, yeah.
Will Bach put me on the board and nominated me for the board. And I think that was around 1997 or 1998.
That would make sense.
And I served continuously through, I think it was 2024.
Yeah, it was late 24, I think.
Right. I became chair when Scott Myers became mayor.
Right.
So he had to step off the board as a volunteer.
Right. Then he probably came back on as the non-executive, as the ex officio.
Right, exactly. And then they were like, who's going to be chair?
Right.
And I was,
because the mayor should not be chair.
And I was always afraid of speaking in front of the council. You know, I just had no experience with that. I'm a finance guy. And I said, all right, I'll be chair if I don't have to speak up in front of council or speak for DBTA. Yeah. And that lasted about 1 minute.
Scott, how about you? What was your time frame on the board and what brought you to it?
I'm probably different than the average board member. I was a customer of the board, of the DBTA board. And I say that I'm a businessman and had a business in Exeter, New Hampshire. And DBTA, my company, was looking for a place to locate. The city of Dover, through DBTA, really worked hard to help me put up a building. In fact, they helped with the financing and all aspects of that. So that was in 2005. So I actually started the building in 2004. It was finished in 2005. Then I moved to Dover. I later became involved with DBTA around 2010 when the city was, through its economic development director, was trying to create more internships. And so I was in the computer business, and I had a lot of great kids coming out of the school who wanted the exposure. So we started bringing them on. But DBTA was the one who was pushing that to help businesses get labor.
Right, it was the BizEd Connect.
That was the BizEd Connect program. And after I had done that for a year or two, I was asked to join the board. Every experience I had had was positive. Me as an entrepreneur starting out and all the help the city gave me, I was really interested in that and coming in and seeing if I could help the next generation of businesses be here. So that's how I came to know DBTA intimately as a customer. And then I joined on the board. And through the course of that, we've helped many businesses, not quite in the same way that I was helped, but we've done things from trying to help them get labor through BizEd, through any other means. And again, the DBTA board around 2016, I think because the city councilor had pushed this, wanted to have more commercial land in the city. There was a belief at that time that if we could get more business, commercial tax rateable realty in the community, it would help ease the tax burden on regular residential property owners. So that was, again, a big project for the city of Dover. And Chris, you and I worked together on that for about 2 years before that finally got done. So that was a great experience. But those are the types of things that occurred when I was on the board.
You know, from my perspective, there are a couple different, both historic roles and current roles for the authority. The first being what you talked about, Scott, of looking for opportunities to bring businesses to Dover, providing an environment that is business friendly, that is advantageous for economic growth. There's another facet, which is advising staff on policies or programs or zoning, as you indicated, where we could say, if we rezone these areas, that would be positive. Tim, can you talk a little bit about what's the conversation like at the DBTA level when those different opportunities are existing?
Well, the opportunities were always to follow what the city council's guidance was for DBTA, which was always trying to increase the commercial tax rate, to grow the tax base and tax revenue without the impacts on schools, police, and fire. So anyone on the board was there to champion commercial development. There was never dissenting voices on the overall mission of DBTA at that time, nor ever. I mean, there was certainly instances where things may be coming up. There might be some different opinions, but for the most part, the drive of the board was to build commercial ratables, and we were all together on that. But it's funny now, I feel that later on, 22, 23, 24, maybe right at the end of my time on the board, was the focus changed to more affordable housing. At the time, the economy was strong enough so that there was a lot of job growth still, and that was always kind of the mission: bring in companies, bring in jobs, bring in tax revenue. But the economy was strong, but people that were trying to move into the area could not find affordable housing and had to forego good job opportunities. So my focus was kind of trying to direct things towards make affordable housing, getting more options for the workers to come into Dover, resettle, and help the businesses that are here grow and continue to attract new businesses.
It really is a double-edged sword, because if you don't have a place for workers to live and afford to live, then you don't have employees. But at the same time, if we rezone everything to housing, affordable or not, then you don't have areas for business growth. And I think, Scott, that was your point on the subcommittee of saying, look, we might need to have some affordable housing in places, but we don't want to cut our nose off to spite our face by saying all of that land that was industrial is no longer.
Yes, we needed the commercial industrial. And when I first was on the board, the city owned a fair amount of property on Venture Drive. Of course, that became Innovation Way and Quality Way.
Right.
And so those were the primary areas that we as a board were trying to fill. But, I would say with the board, we also had some good discussions. To give you some insight on that, when we're discussing what businesses are coming in, we're qualifying those customers. Why do we want them here? What type of business is it? Is there going to be a smokestack? We might not want that one. I mean, what are the jobs we're talking about? So in our role as a board, we had influence over who the city sold the land to, what type of businesses. And that's where we always spent the most time, and I think had the most consensus, was, is this going to create a ton of traffic? What are the jobs we're talking about? And you get that in the mix. I mean, we really like manufacturing. One of the things manufacturing has shown is that there's a lot of collateral jobs that come with that, even if a packaging company needs help. All kinds of things. So we, and one of the things we didn't really like was warehouses or things like storage spaces, because we looked at them and said, well, there's not going to be a high tax rateable base. They're not going to create really great jobs, not what we desired. So that's, I think, where Tim and I, we focused on that, and the board really, those were the conversations.
I was just going to say, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say, one of the things you both really always hammered home on was staying on message of what was the mission of the park. The mission of the park was not to create warehouse or self-storage. The mission of the park was to create advanced manufacturing, job opportunities, tax base. And so the low-hanging fruit that we might have been presented with from time to time might sound good, but when you bite the apple, you find that there's actually nothing in it, because, the warehouse that has 3 people over the shift. I remember one opportunity that it truly was that, when they were all hot to trot. They were going to build this massive building. And one of you said, well, what's the job? And there was like this long pause. Well, we automate. So, it is a truth of manufacturing today. Productivity, a lot of it's driven by that. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't hold out and say, What about the jobs?
Right. And even in those manufacturing, even when they are automated, the caliber of a person running those type of machines now is, it's not like a drill press operator in the old days, or what I thought of in the old days, of just drilling holes in a piece of metal. And these are computer controlled, fairly high tech. Right. And because of the training, the skill sets involved, and there's plenty of demand for that labor, those created good jobs. And those were the type of jobs that also, they meant so much more, because when you have people earning more money in those type of jobs, they're spending more in the community. They're going out. And one of the things we focus on two things, Chris. One of the other big things we focus on was infill in the city.
Right.
We also looked at downtown. There was a belief, still is a belief, that if you're going to attract a business to Dover or anywhere, some executives are making that decision, executives who are going to want to live here.
Yep.
They come here, they're going to want to see there's a quality of life, there's a nice downtown, it's safe,
not boring.
Everything that we have here. And so...
Are there local banks?
But certainly downtown Dover, you go back 30 years, downtown Dover was fairly tough. You go back to Portsmouth in the 1980s, downtown Portsmouth was pretty tough. And they fixed that. And we were trying to help any of the businesses downtown, and those wouldn't be the manufacturing things we're talking about. We're talking about businesses, restaurants, entertainment, things like that.
Right, the collateral.
Yes, the collateral, that was the quality of life. And so one fed the other.
So, Tim, one of the things that it always struck me about the membership of the board was the variety. Mm-hmm. You represented finance and banking, Scott, an entrepreneur. There were a good broad section of folks, and I think there still are, for that matter. Can you talk a little about why that's important?
Well, you need different skill sets. We always seem to have an attorney on the board because we were selling land.
Right.
We were looking at leases. So it was nice to have an attorney. We always seem to have a builder. So again, selling land. We had a program through with the city and the state where this brought Scott in right at the beginning was the lease purchase. So we would have the lessee design and build the building, the city would fund it, and then permanent financing would pay off the city when it was sold eventually to the lessee. So that's exactly how Scott came to Dover. And I think we did that with one other one, at least that I can recall. I think it was the Comproco building.
That was the Comproco building. That's right. On Production Drive. Yes.
Yeah.
So, and that was a great program that the state offered. I think it's a little less attractive these days just because of some of the funding and inflation and some of those other factors. I know both of you were probably on the board the last time we had one that was pitched to us, and it imploded maybe 3 times. We kept trying to make it work.
Right.
And the cost of construction just really, if you are not aware of it, you're not aware of it. And you see those numbers and you just get blown away.
Eye-popping. Yeah.
I would say that was one thing that we saw often. When people wanted to come to Dover and they started getting building prices, everybody had sticker shock.
Right.
That happened almost every time.
Right.
And I don't think that's a Dover thing. I think that's...
Well, that's everywhere. Yeah. But anybody that wanted to buy some of the land in Enterprise Park or anywhere else in the city and build ground up, always a sticker shock. And then on top of that, the appraisals never came in justifying the costs. So that was always a financing challenge.
Right.
So
you either need to bring more cash to the table.
Exactly.
Or, I think, unfortunately, we still find when someone comes to visit business development, one of the first things either James, Reed, or I say to them is, what's your business plan look like? Well, I have this vision. I have this dream. That's great. But what is the actual, have you been to the SBA or some other group that can help you write a business plan so you could see how financially viable your dream is? And they'll look at us like, why would we do that? And we look at them like, this is why you should do that. Right. But I think you're right, Tim. You get these folks in front of the board and someone would say, well, how many employees? Oh, I don't want to grow. Or what's the truck traffic? What's the impacts? And
what's the finishes? What are the building finishes?
Right.
Because we're trying to protect, the covenants, the building covenants. We're trying to protect the existing, building owners that are already in the park that have gone over the top on, a high quality building.
Right. The investments that have been made need to be protected.
Yeah.
Right. And when you compare what that whole park became versus the older park on the other side of town, it's a pretty good contrast, right? You could see the quality of it, and I think that's also reflected in the amount of taxes that the city's able to collect from that park.
Yeah, I remember at one point there was a group that wanted to do like landscaping, and we were all like, "That's just essentially outside storage."
That is exactly what they were going to do with it. They just needed a place to park equipment.
Yeah, that is not a tax positive
No.
adventure.
No, not at all.
So, can either one of you, or hopefully both of you, sort of think about some of the changes that you saw over your terms? You both were on a decent amount of time, and I'm wondering, you get on for one reason and you stay on for a while. Tim, you mentioned some of the changes that were towards the end that made you think you'd done your time for God and country, which you certainly did. And we all very much appreciate your commitment. But I'm thinking we know some of the trends, and Scott, you mentioned one of them of we sort of phased out of the how can government prop you up to start,
Yes.
to be more supportive of you in the long run, being more supportive of a developer that comes forward and says, I want to develop a park, as opposed to the city developing the park. That's probably the major one.
That's a huge change because even in my time, we were always trying to get more budget to acquire more land. And that's something that we campaigned for many times. And there's always some concerns when you do that, public versus private, what's appropriate for the government to do. I personally believe it was appropriate for the city to have some land. It was one of the tools we had in our toolkit. So if we had the right type of business coming in, we had that ability to really help them with the land and give them favorable deals. A public board like DIBTA operates so differently than a private developer because a private developer wants to do it as cheap as possible. And they're not necessarily they're not necessarily thinking about how nice can this be and how much can we pay in taxes. Right, they're almost the other side of us. And so I liked it when we had the land to sell because we got to help businesses and we were involved with that so we could help swing people we wanted here. And I think that has changed, though, because it's just not in the budget these days. So that's unfortunate.
I think the budget side has changed. The risk aversion has changed.
Yep.
Or risk tolerance, I should say, has changed. And towards the end of both of your terms, the quality of land that we owned out there, they were clearly the last lots. And so the wetland component, the ledge component, that all impacts how good of a company you can attract because, for instance, the building you build, you need size, you need scope, and the lots we have, unfortunately, cannot hold that size because of the amount of wetlands and other environmental factors.
Well, and there's another element, and I think part of it was we worked pretty hard in the earlier years to try and get businesses to come to Dover. That park took many, many decades to sell all the land.
Yes, it did.
Now, as the city's matured, become a much more desirable location, the DIBTA board doesn't really have to work quite as hard to try and get to attract businesses here. You almost maybe can leave it in the hands of the private developers because people want to be here.
Well, that's a really good point. And Tim, you're nodding at this, so I'm betting that you have a similar thought. Is when you step back and you look at the reputation of the community, but also the business environment, it's less about how do we make you comfortable being here to being part of the market, and you're here because you want to be here.
Right. I was just going to comment that DIBTA had a budget for another park, and that was $200,000, I believe, that was in there for years and years and years. And we ended up giving that back. It was in the
capital improvements.
Capital improvements.
Yep.
Yeah, CIP.
Right.
Right. So we turned that back and didn't spend it just because we wanted to go find something.
Part of it, the problem we ran into, which was an underlying problem, is the cost of land kept going up.
Oh, sure.
So that money wasn't going to go as far as when it was originally allocated.
Yeah, and the political winds changed too, right? With the appetite. Yeah. It was clear that the city council was not going to spend a dime more on anything they didn't have to. Right. And they didn't feel that, having another park was, maybe a worthwhile investment at the time. Maybe someday it will, but, it's just... I always, I'm a private sector guy. If the private sector can do it, they should be doing it. But Enterprise Park was a long, developers probably would have changed 4 times with 3 bankruptcies, and somebody finally would have made some money.
Right.
But only a municipality can, kind of carry it that far.
Right. That tolerance question.
Tolerance. Right.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, you both said, "I've done my job and I'm ready to move on." Do you both look back on it as a positive experience, a positive interaction?
Absolutely. I was on it for almost 30 years. Really enjoyed my time meeting everybody, dealing with the city and the inner workings between planning, DIBTA, the city manager's office. We hired, when I started, Beth Thompson was the development director, and then we hired Dan Barafaldi and now James Burden. And so, it was good working very closely with them for those years. All the board members that have come and gone over that period of time was, very fulfilling time, was well worth, and it wasn't heavy lifting per se. It was just a couple hours once a month, and then some, as chairman for as long as I was, there was a little bit of additional work, planning agendas and things like that. But it was always very interesting. As a community guy, I lived in Dover, still do, and enjoyed being part of the community from that side, as well as being a resident, as well as being a business person in the community. So it was, I found it very fulfilling and worthwhile. I hated to get off it, but I felt like it was time for new blood. For as long as you stay someplace, it's hard to get change. You have to have a change at the top to really get some different directions. And I just felt that it was time for a different direction, probably, not the one I was used to.
I tell the story from time to time. I was on a nonprofit board for a while, and there's a certain point where you're looking around the table and you think, I might be the one out of sync. This is not going the way I would go, and you realize I might be the one out of sync. They need to go in the direction they're saying to go, right. And instead of fighting things constantly, I'm going to step back and let them be successful. Mm-hmm. Scott, good experience for you? I'm hoping since you both agreed to be here today.
It was the last thing I ever expected to be doing. I had never in my life been involved in any type of civic engagement. And then because of my history with DIBTA, what it was, and when I was asked, I said, yeah, this is a good board. They've done good things for me, and I had become involved. And so I found it very fulfilling. I came to understand how few people in the community really participate in the civic engagement. And what was stunning to me when we went through rezoning was how few people will step out and get involved in something like that, and really made me realize the value of contributing to your community, how important that is. So that was kind of my civic engagement. And then for community service, I'm on another board, nonprofit, as you know, Chris. And I get as much enjoyment out of that too. And I realized with that organization, without contribution from citizens, things aren't going to happen. I wish more people would get involved. More than anything. We always had to go try and recruit people. There aren't lines of people who are ready to do this. And I think if people did get involved, they would come to understand it's fulfilling and it's a worthwhile effort.
I appreciate the time you both gave, not just today, but over the past 30 years. You both were very integral to where we are today from an economic standpoint here in the community. Tim, you're spot on that the reputation has changed, and it wouldn't have been without the work that you both and the other members of the Industrial Development Authority put forward and the thought you put into saying, here's where we need to be, and here's why it's important to ask those questions about what jobs are you bringing, what kind of industry are you bringing, and making sure that they fit where the community vision is. And I think that no one understands, other than probably Beth, Dan, and James, the amount of detail that went into those conversations. And we're not going to do it justice here today, but I appreciate all of the knowledge and experience you both brought to the table. And I appreciate you coming out of semi-retirement to come and chat with me today.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Chris.
Thank you very much and have a great day.
It was a pleasure.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Dover has a wealth of history in its over 400 years of existence. Coming up, Mike Gillis is going to share some of that history with us.
It was this week in 1883 that Dover's own Wingate store made its way into newspapers across the nation. The advertisement, placed by a Mr. Tibbets, proudly described how he had purchased a bottle of Hunt's Remedy at Wingate's in Dover, New Hampshire, and credited it with restoring his health. What might appear at first glance to be an ordinary testimonial in a local paper was in fact part of a vast web of marketing. Ads like this were reprinted from coast to coast, offering dramatic tales of relief and cure to a public eager for hope. Hunt's Remedy was one of the more famous patent medicines of the late 19th century. Originally concocted in New York and later manufactured in Providence, Rhode Island by William E. Clark, the formula promised to cure kidney disease, dropsy, and a host of ailments involving the bladder and urinary tract. Its colorful advertising featured perhaps one of the most striking images of the era, a healthy man fending off the Grim Reaper himself with nothing more than a bottle of Hunt's Remedy. The symbolism was clear: buy this medicine and cheat death. But beneath the dramatic illustrations and heartfelt testimonials was a troubling reality. Like so many proprietary cures of the time, Hunt's Remedy offered more spectacle than science. Medical journals of the period noted its main ingredient was dogbane, a plant known to have some effect on the heart, but hardly the miracle cure claimed. Still, clever marketing, combined with the public's fear of serious diseases such as Bright's disease, sold tens of thousands of bottles. The advertisement tied to Dover and Wingate's reminds us just how commonplace such testimonials were. Newspapers across America, including in Dover, were filled with them. Short notes from satisfied customers who declared themselves cured of lifelong illness after just a few doses. Whether these letters came from real people or from copywriters at the company mattered little. Readers in towns like Dover would see the name of a familiar business, recognize it as legitimate, and assume the medicine must truly work. This was the golden age of quack remedies. Historians estimate that by the 1880s, there were thousands of such nostrums on the market, advertised with colorful trade cards, posters, and newspaper columns. They promised to cure everything from baldness to consumption, and many contained little more than alcohol, opiates, or herbs of dubious effect. The industry flourished, largely unregulated, until the Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 began to rein in such practices. By then, millions of Americans had tried, and often trusted, these so-called remedies. For Dover, the 1883 Tibbetts testimonial is a snapshot of a time when the line between medicine and marketing was thin. Wingate's may have been simply the local outlet, but its name carried enough weight to be used in national advertising campaigns. And while we may smile today at the audacity of such claims, the story of Hunt's Remedy is a reminder of how hope, fear, and clever advertising could combine to create one of the most profitable industries of the 19th century. That's how a bottle sold at Wingate's in Dover became part of that national story. A tale where commerce and cure blurred together, and where the promise of beating back death could be bought for just 75 cents.
Thanks for listening to the Dover Download this week. If you like what you heard, subscribe through your favorite podcast aggregator. And if you have something you want to hear a topic on, let us know. Finally, this is just one of the many ways we share information about the city of Dover. You can subscribe to the Dover Downloads email newsletter every week, or other newsletters that we have, by going to the City of Dover homepage, www.dover.nh.gov. Have a great week.